Okay, welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us today. This session is all about practical steps to stay inspection ready year round, making compliance part of your everyday workflow, avoiding the last minute scramble, and honestly, feeling more confident about processes. So who am I and why am I here? My name is Tiffany Gabriel, and I have the extraordinarily long title of Senior Business Analyst and Technical Sales Executive with LabVantage, based in sunny Queensland in Australia. I've been on the LIMS journey for about 25 years, and I'm not sure how I still look as young as this picture, but I do. In this time, I've worn just about every hat you can imagine. Business analyst, LIMS administrator, and for eight years, I worked in a pharmaceutical manufacturing facility. So I lived and breathed compliance, and yes, sometimes it was slammed into me at full force. Back in those days, we were running a paper-based system in the lab, and let me tell you, if you've ever worked in a lab with one, the younger people on the calls, hopefully you haven't, you know that it's chaos. Paper everywhere, manual entries, sticky notes, signatures, that vanish into the abyss. I once had a customer when I was working as a consultant in the LIMS field that they used to write their results on their hands. Now, obviously not a regulated lab, but still, that's a nightmare, right? And as myself being neurodiverse and a person with ADHD, things just got missed around me. Not because, we didn't care, but because humans make mistakes in systems that rely entirely on humans, And then the laboratory that I worked for, we went digital. I worked on the LIMS project as the super user SME from, lab, the scientist. And eventually I became the LIMS administrator, and suddenly it was like order out of the chaos, like audit trails, automated, traceability, built in. My brain could finally relax. And because the system was doing the heavy lifting, it wasn't just life-changing for me, it elevated the entire laboratory. It meant fewer sleepless nights, fewer compliance scares, and more time for the actual science. I don't know about you, I actually did have nightmares during some of the really stressful periods of working in this laboratory. So I speak from, the heart with that one. But that's why I'm so passionate, about this topic, because today I want to share real world steps and show you how moving from reactive to proactive compliance isn't just possible, it's empowering. Because compliance shouldn't slow you down, it should lift you up. I like to think of this as a compliance confidence booster session. All right, so let's dive in. This is just a beautiful slide that shows you the title pretty much. So we're going to go through the practical steps in this part of the session to get you what you can put in place for not having stress in your life, right? So what we've got here is these beautiful rocket ships. This is where the fun begins. You've probably seen I'm looking at the rocket ship on the slide right now, and honestly, like it taking off in this big cloud of smoke, the way I visualize this is that it is how the journey feels, taking off from like the compliance on the ground where you've got, again, I'll use the word chaos a lot because that's my life, disorganized systems and manual, logs and, spreadsheets and the logbook for this ethanol and all those kind of manual things, all these little pieces that are causing chaos because they don't talk to each other. And you're leaving that reality behind and landing in a world where audit inspection readiness is just coded into the matrix. So point one, from reactive to proactive, let's be honest, most of us have been there. The dreaded audit panic mode, the last minute dash to pull documents together, emails back and forth from quality. Everyone suddenly stops work and starts to clean for a week. That's when this queen would usually like to, take annual leave, as organization is not my superpower. We've all been there and done that. We've burnt out. And today we're going to flip that script and talk about what inspection readiness looks like when it's just part of your day, not a once a year drama episode. The second point, real world regulator tested tips from global labs. And yes, these come from experience, not a textbook. I've worked with labs across ANZ and beyond, and what I've learned is that compliance looks different everywhere, but the pain points and those are universal, right? So I'll share what actually works when you're under the microscope. And point 3, compliance that lifts your lab up, not slows you down. Because if your systems are dragging your team into the compliance swamp, it's time for a better approach. Compliance should feel like a safety net, not a straitjacket. The right tools and mindset free your team to focus on the science, not scrambling around, By the end of the session, my goal is for you to walk away thinking, okay, compliance can actually be calm, controlled, and dare I say it, confidence building. So let's get into it. Audit readiness, built-in compliance, data integrity, and trust. Here's the thing. These aren't separate goals. They're all connected. If your processes aren't automated and embedded in your daily workflow, you're basically setting yourself up for fire drills every audit season. And no one loves those, right? Standing still, going, ooh. Anyway, when compliance is built, not bolted on, your lab moves from reactive to proactive. That's how you achieve true audit readiness every day, not just when someone is coming to visit an audit. Data integrity, that's the foundation of trust. Regulators trust you. Your customers trust you. And internally, your team trusts the system because it's clear, traceable, and accurate. And why does this matter? Because without trust, everything falls apart. Your results, your reputation, your ability to operate. The good news is, a LIMS like LabVantage makes this second nature. It's not just a database, it's your compliance safety net, your audit trail, your built-in check across, against the human errors that happen. This is the shift from compliance as a chore, right? To compliance as confidence. Okay, so let's take this a step further. We've talked about audit readiness and building trust. Now let's talk about what that actually looks like, in a day-to-day setting. Here's the truth. Audits aren't a storm. They're not something to fear or, want to run away from. They're just a point of proof in your systems. So they're your chance to show that all of your internal systems work, your quality systems, your SOPs, your test methods, everything that's running is working as it should. The problem, most labs, they do treat audit, like a weather event, like unpredictable, stressful, something that you can't just get through. We had a cyclone on the Gold Coast, and let me tell you, I'd stopped living for 4 days as this cyclone was approaching, wondering what was going to go on. And I kind of feel like that's similar to the feeling I used to have when I was in a laboratory, in the audit. We're either running around trying to prep, right? Or we're paused in this eerie feeling of what's to come. And let me tell you, the cyclone on the Gold Coast did not come for me. So all of that worry and all of that stuff that happened, I should have just had a party, a cyclone party like people in northern Queensland have. So what are we trying to achieve here? No running around unnecessarily, no stress, just proof you're doing it right. And I love this line because it's true. Readiness is built, not downloaded. You can't buy a one-time fix. It comes from creating processes that do the heavy lifting for you every single day. That's where LabVantage shines. It turns good intentions into actual automated compliance. So when someone says, we've got an audit next week, your response can be like, cool, bring it on, right? Okay, so I'm going to change it up a little bit. And I'm going to have you sit with your thoughts. I'm going to take a pause. And what I want you to do is close your eyes, and what's the first word that you think of, or you might have a multitude of words, that come to your mind when you hear the word audit? All right, have you got some? I bet it wasn't fun. You know what I mean? Like the first word, you're like, ooh, audit, fun, yay, no. I mean, I would be thinking things like stress, panic, nightmare, maybe, why, you know, and maybe even dread. Does that sound familiar? I mean, for me, when I think of an audit, I'm like, annual leave, you know, that kind of thing. But here's the twist. It doesn't have to feel like that. What if the word could mean something like confidence, proof, even calm? I know sounds wild, right? But that's exactly what we're here to do, and learn how to flip the narrative, the script. You know, I like to say this in my own personal life. If people say to you something and it doesn't feel right for you, flip it. You know, people always used to tell me that I was too much, I talk too much. I'm like, flip it, you know? Maybe you don't, have enough words, and I have a lot of words, which is fabulous. Same with the audit. We can heal this by being prepared and being like, amazing, let's go. Here's the system. Here's your printouts. Auditors, have fun with that, because they shouldn't, the audits just should be proof that you're doing it right, not punishment for doing it wrong. And when you've got systems that have your back every single day, that one scary word suddenly becomes no big deal. And hey, if you're still thinking, don't worry, by the end of this, we're going to shift that mindset together. All right, next slide is the audit ready monthly checklist. So I just put this together. You can take a little screenshot if you like. These are the five key things I personally think that, you should do every month. Now, obviously, every laboratory is different and you'll have your own checklist, but just think of this as an inspiration, right? And these are things that you can automate using LIMS and, QMS systems. So what do we want to do? We want to review the critical workflows, okay? So confirm SOPs are current in LIMS. Now, when it comes to that, if you've got your SOPs just stored as a paper base and it's not in any kind of document management system, that's going to be a little bit of a nightmare, because that means basically you have to have all of these, other ways of notifications that things are becoming the word is overdue, and you need to review by a certain date, and you have to schedule and da-da-da. And again, that sounds like an ADHD nightmare. But if it's in a system like a LIMS, it's going to tell you, hey, this expires in 3 months. What are we going to do about it? All those notifications get automated. You want to check your audit trail for your, results, anything to do to spot anomalies before the regulator does. So the LIMS systems, the audit trails, if you switch it on, is everything, right? So it's every time a user logs in to every time they approve something or unapprove something. So all of that's in there. And when it's in the system, you can then, run reports on it and check for things. So, AI, it's a thing. You can actually give it a bunch of search queries and things like that for it to be spot the anomaly, which is amazing. No stress. Run your traceability report for the actual, sample test result, whatever you're releasing at a time. It might be a batch of samples, whatever your quality process is. We should be looking at that before you approve anything. And I've got some examples, so I'm not going to give too much away with that. I got a real life juicy story to tell you. Let's put it that way. Review complaints in QMS. So, if you've got any investigations, if you've got any, audit findings, all of those can be automated within, LabVantage, but within your systems, if it's a QMS or if it's a QMS within a LIMS system, something like that, need to be make sure and you're doing all those things, and those are actioned and they're not sitting open, not being looked at. And making sure the user accesses are correct. So keeping permissions tight and documented. You don't want, you might not want somebody in the R&D department. You might not want somebody in the quality department to see something in the R&D departments because that's a little bit, secret. Or you might want to, not have a certain level of analyst being able to enter test results that they haven't been trained in. So all of those type of things are important that you just review, on a monthly basis what's happening in your system, as well as, a daily basis when you're interacting, with the system. Okay, so what are auditors actually looking for? Now, everybody's probably heard by now data integrity, ALCOA plus, and they're like, acronyms, right? I hate acronyms. But I'm just going to run down in case you're new to this space. A is attributable. Every action is tied to a person, time, and a reason. So for example, if an analyst updates a sample weight, the system shows who, when, and why. No ghost entries, right? L is legible, which I can never say that word. Let's call it readable, legible. Anyway, data must be readable, retrievable, and permanent. So for example, no more, smudge on, like notebooks that have got bloody stains on them from chemicals, and it might have like the fluid that you knocked onto your paperwork might have run the ink or something like that because it's a solvent. Digital records, they don't smudge. We like that. C, contemporaneous. Record data at a time that it's generated. So for example, no more end of day memory dumps. Timestamps prove the real time entries. Original, keeping a true or certified copy. So for example, instrument data flows straight into LIMS, not transcribed from, the printout of the system from the instrument. Accurate, data must be correct, validated and error checked. So like an example of that would be built-in calculations to reduce manual errors. So, Excel can be changed. As much as you want to say that they're just locked down and macros are validated, there's ways around it. And the plus part, we have got complete, not missing. Every step and every result is logged. Consistent, it's chronological, no gaps. Enduring, long-term storage and security. Available, accessible when needed, especially for audits. But what are the auditors really looking for? So traceability, they can follow the thread from sample to report without getting lost. Integrity, does each piece of data have a clear owner and timestamp? Control, it's obvious that there's no way to backdate or overwrite without leaving a trail. Consistency, no unexplained gaps or last minute edits before the audit. So think about if you're somebody reviewing a result and you get an assay result that was changed at 11 p.m. without an explanation. In a paper system, you wouldn't catch that because they don't have to write in the final result, we did this at 11 p.m. In LabVantage, that system is logged, timestamp, username, reason for change, and the auditors give confidence that that's what ALCOA means. So, the intention of it is it's not about rules, it's about building the trust that one data point at a time. So I pretty much think I've just done all of those without actually pushing through my slides. So that's funny. Hello, Tiffany. Anyway, when you look at the slides later, you can see all of the slides my marketing manager Sumita put in, and she put a lot of effort into this, and they're so cute. But I've told the story in one slide, so we can skip through, but we can kind of stop it here. So imagine, the whole purpose of this thing is to go like, you're an auditor, right? What are you walking through the lab and what are you looking for? And which things would make you go, yeah, these guys are on it. or, oh gee, this is not good. So when you're doing that with your business and continuous improvement and all the wonderful, I worked in the GMP lab, remember, we've got those wonderful things. That's what it's really saying. It's really saying, like, what are we sitting on and not acting on? And what do we want to make better? So that's what an auditor really is looking for. And you should be, you'll be auditing your own lab every day in your life. So that's what they're going to do. All right. What we're going to look at is workflows that will run through the system to do the heavy lifting for you. So these are some things in this slide where LIMS can really help. Things like routine actions. This one says here, if your system does the paperwork while you're doing the work, you're winning. We're talking about electronic notebooks, or in the case of regulated labs, LES. So that is, instead of changing everything, it's locked down workflows where the user must weigh this before they can move on to the next step. So LES is laboratory execution system. If you've never heard of that term, it ensures that the user does things in a controlled manner in the way of which the test method is meant to do. So like I was mentioning before, the scheduling and reviews, you don't want to miss a deadline to refresh that SOP before it's too late. You need to be reviewing that probably a couple of months beforehand. That just makes me it just makes me think of like a personal example where it's like, you want to change your insurance, but now the bill's due and you're never going to save that money because you never did the review because you forgot it was coming up. That we don't want to have that happen in, your laboratory. So audit trails, that's all done in the background. So you don't have to record times and record dates. It's doing it in real time, and you'll be able to review those audit trails and easily spot if something's a little bit fishy. And with LIMS systems, the role-based permissions are baked in. Apart from the threat of being fired, they're really, in a paper-based system, what's stopping someone from signing something that they're not authorized to do and it got found out later, Hopefully that's not happening, but it's just an example that I can think of, because if you're locked down into a user manual, right, a user role, they can't do it. So, boom. It's not possible. They don't have the access. They're frozen out. They maybe can't even see the record or don't have an approve button, all of those type of things that are in there. And as a bonus, LabVantage specifically has a built-in QMS for complaint handling. It logs investigations. You're able to follow it through and have, I'm going to show you screenshots. So I'm going to show you screenshots from the system in a minute, so I won't talk about that too much. All right. Just view this slide as a kind of wrap up to my whole last 18-minute rant. Cool. And this one too. All right, now we're going to get into a bit of the fun part. This is not the first time I've told this story, and it is an old story, but it's a juicy one. So, the laboratory that I used to work in, when I was a LIMS administrator, we had a situation that occurred and an audit trail proved everything and saved the day. All right. Set in the scenes. There was this gentleman who was a laboratory technician working in, we called it classical techniques. So they're doing things like loss on drying, moisture tests, heavy metal, the chemical tests, not the GCs, those kind of tests, right? And a lot of the time they were seen in the break room. When they were walking around the laboratory, they didn't seem to be as busy as everybody. They were very slow, with their work. And one time we actually found somebody, there's gossip, you know what it's like. Humans are humans and they like to gossip, especially in laboratories. But someone found this gentleman sleeping in the toilet, not the actual toilet, like on the chairs, right? Here we go, found asleep in the change task room. What came to me was they were investigating his work, because once the person found that him sleeping in the change room, they were like, this dude isn't working. No one's seen him working, everybody's talking about it. So the review chemists came to me and said, Tiffany, can you run an audit report on every test that this user, has done? Surely something in the time stamping would prove that maybe there's something a little bit weird. Anyway, I run the audit trail. And basically, if you do a test like loss on drying, right, you're basically drying a substance over time until it reaches a consistent weight. So in a LIMS system, every time you're doing your weight, we didn't have the balancers connected back then. This is the 2000s, but it'd be harder now to get away with this, I think. But manually typing the results in, it was, instead of being, it was like the SOP was like 4 hours, after 4 hours, weigh it half an hour until it's a consistent weight. Well, all of the dates and timestamps were put in at the same time, wasn't they? Weren't they? Yes, they were. So the dude was just typing in whatever he thinks as according to make the moisture test pass, right? So when we were able to prove this, they were able to, fire or remove the tech from the situation without having to go through, a massive performance management. It's just costly to watch someone and to make them do their job and then prove that they can't do it over probably a 3-month period. This is an Australian thing. This is a New Zealand thing specific. I don't know, other countries it's probably pretty easy to move people on, but in my market, this audit trail, I'm pretty proud of what we did with this, because it saved a lot of money, and these are pharmaceuticals. It saved, potentially a lot of, a harm to people swallowing these products that are already sick. So we were able to look at everything that he had touched over the period of time when things got bad, and they did a risk assessment on every one, and the vital products that basically could have, caused issues, they retested them. And that was the money that was spent, was to rectify the situation. So the LIMS was brilliant. And then, obviously everybody heard about this. So no one started to cut corners, right? It's lifted the culture of the laboratory into everybody does the right thing. Otherwise, you're stuffed. And then, so we found the issue fast. We contained the damage, and, the regulators wouldn't have an issue with what we did because we found it and we fixed it. Amazing, right? Without the proper audit trail, people might still be gossiping about this dude. I don't think he would last 20 years, to be honest, but he would definitely, hopefully, have never progressed to any of the more tests that were more difficult. Anyway, that's what the audit trail is doing. It's like, I think this is funny, but the detective that never sleeps, it's always going to be in the background capturing all this information about the users, about the tests, about the samples, about the results, and it's going to prove to you what is happening. And hopefully it's only good things, right? So let's just have a quick chat on the lab investigation module. This little thing is what we call a tram line. And then these are tram stops. So when it comes to laboratory investigations, the user can just easily find what they want to do. Do they want to approve something? Do they want to create a new incident, work orders, all these kind of things? So the manage incidents allows you to enter in what is happening. So whether it's something that's like a planned incident where you're going to do an audit or an investigation on something, or something like an out of spec investigation where this result failed and we don't know why, so now we're going to investigate it, or anything like that. Any type of incidents, you'll have templates for those, you'll be able to enter in details, all that fun stuff. So this is what it looks like inside. You have a bunch of settings where you can capture all of the information into a structured record. So for example, you might have a department, a location. It could be, you could be linked to a sample or a piece of equipment or batches for full traceability. They'll have their own approval roles and attachments and all those kind of things. So just think of the incident as kind of like the jacket of everything that's going to happen, and then it keeps it all together. The incident investigation is what are the steps we're doing. So, was the appropriate method used? This is just a checklist, right? Did they weigh it correctly? Was the piece of equipment in calibration? Blah, blah, blah. So you can do this with a templated solution, like a normal laboratory investigation, or you can create one on the fly, or you could do a combination of both, where maybe you have a couple of investigation templates, then you add extra bits on for this specific thing that you've done. Okay, and then as part of that, you've got outcomes. So, what did you do afterwards? What was the steps? How was it identified? Did you retest it? All those kind of things. So again, those are just steps that you put in the system. The key thing is out of those, you have action plans. And the action plans are things that, are your CAPAs, right? So short-term fix, proposed corrective action so it doesn't happen again, and follow-ups and all those kind of things can be tracked and planned, okay? Basically, from those CAPAs, they create things called work orders, which you can assign to users and progress them as they update, and have due dates and all that in the time. So all of that builds in accountability, and then you cannot you've got to close the incidents closed when everything is fully checked out and officially closed. Now you might out of that have scheduled something that happens for a work order that happens every year. You do this audit that you decide. That's a whole nother issue. But for this investigation, when everything is ticked off, everything is signed off, it's done. And when an auditor comes in and says, I want to see, what are your current CAPAs? You've got everything in there. You've got who's it's assigned to, what's its status, all of the information around what they're actually doing is in the work orders. And I didn't have time to put that in there. It's quite technical, but let's just put it this way. It's scheduled, it's in there. The user knows they have to do it. They won't skip it. Okay, all right. Now we're coming to the end. I have got a question highlight. So when you registered for the webinar, you were asked if you had any specific questions, and thank you to everybody who put questions in there, because to be honest, it helped me build the content so that I was answering the questions right, as well as talking about what I wanted to talk about. But it's really important, as an audience, what do you want to hear? I've got a topic, but I've built a lot of my content around the questions. So thanks for that. There was one specifically around hospitals, in a hospital setting, and I'll touch on that quickly in my response to this one, because this is a broader one that is talking about compliance, international standards, regulatory reports, how to automate all of those sort of things. In replying to this question, all right, so LabVantage has been designed from the ground up to support compliance with international standards like ISO 17025, GMP, things like that. So specifically, we are actually an ISO 9001 certified company. So our solutions are built and delivered within a strong QMS, employing safeguards like document control, record management, and change control to track any changes and manages the authority to make changes. It's really important that our system is subject to the system that we're helping you to maintain, if that makes sense. I feel really quite passionate about that we have these certifications, and we also have our own information security management system. Again, we are certified to ISO 27001. So that allows us, we have this culture of high standard, which allows us to make sure that you are, getting all your proper certifications managed. We've got EU, GDPR, UK data protection, HIPAA compliance for the hospitals, all that kind of stuff. And labs are assured that their LabVantage solutions meet GAMP 5 and follow IEE, I think it's 3 E's, right? 3 E's, 1012 standards, and a bunch of other stuff. So, you know, as well as 21 CFR Part 11, all that fun stuff. So all of that stuff is baked into the system to allow to make sure that you are basically complying to all of the industries that we service, not just, you know, pharma, but hospitals, environmental, all those fun things, NATA, all those accreditations. And when it comes to the reporting side, the system can automatically generate compliance and regulatory reports. I was mentioning it before briefly, but you can schedule them and run them, which means you don't have to hunt around through spreadsheets or pulling data from multiple sources. Everything you need is right there. And finally, supporting internal and external audits is where LabVantage, you know, really shines. Every action in the system, logged, linked, making it easy to trace back to their source. For external audits, you can even grant controlled read-only access so auditors see exactly what they need to know without compromising data integrity. So, you know, I think that's really good, because a lot of the times, if you treat the auditor like, oh no, we'll just get everything, only what you ask for, it kind of doesn't really help build trust. But if you can give them access to the system and say, there you go, we've got nothing to hide, I feel like that's really good for rapport. Well, it is. But in summary, the system does the heavy lifting so you can focus on just running your lab confidently, staying, you know, inspection ready at every time. So doing what labs do, scientists doing science, not doing a bunch of paperwork and being really frustrated. So thank you for coming on the journey with me today. I did run over time, so my apologies for that. I hope that you've got lots of good ideas and confidence that, you know, LabVantage specifically will be able to, you know, transform your lab into a place where you're not stressed about compliance. LIMS systems can be expensive, so we want to at least make sure that, you know, you're getting that value back, and that's where your return of investment is from. So please, if you have any further questions, please make sure to reach out to the emails that will be sent with the links. And thanks for taking your time out to hang out with me. I had fun. Thanks.